This is not my first Michael Bratton rodeo.
No, I think
I've been on the Michael Bratton podcast, or that SEC, whatever you call that stupid thing. I suffered through a couple of times.
Welcome in, latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. Go by SEC Mike on the Twitters. And there he is, Mr. Can't Get His Computer to Work, Steven Lassan, senior editor over at Athlon Sports. Steven, welcome back, my friend.
Hey, Mike, it's good to be here, my friend. I deeply apologize to you and all the cousins for all of the technical issues that we are having today. But man, I am fired up for some playoff games this weekend. We got some portal chaos. I'm sure more college football chaos still to come. Old SEC friend Dave Clawson stepping down at Wake Forest today. So, man, what offseason at this point, right?
Right. And as cousin Glenn says, Hugh Freeze must be in charge of Steven's internet connection.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
And the legend JR, man, it don't matter if we're late, if we're delayed, technical difficulties. He's gifting people memberships this time. We'll have to see. Oh, here we go. Sean Jones. Sean, welcome to the family. Thanks to cousin JR. What a legend. What a legend. So appreciate all these cousins hanging out. Football, to some of us, feels like it's over, Steven, but we're still rocking. We still got tons of football action. We got lots of bowl games. We got the college football playoff coming up and the transfer portal. Even if your team's out of it, there's still reason to tune in because of this transfer portal. So we're going to get into all of it. But before we do that, as always, got to remind the folks, we're brought to you by MyBookie, the online sports book. Head on over to mybookie.ag today. Put in that promo code. If you sign up for a new account and you put in an initial deposit, that SEC, that'll be your promo code. They will double your initial deposit, and we need it because Steven needs to pay his internet bill. So sign up for MyBookie and help us out there. But hey, question of the day, Steven. Shout out Hog fan Thor. How many more players did Lane steal from Arkansas today? Any new ones that Ole Miss stole?
Mike, I think today has been relatively quiet after taking Luke Haas, Jalen Braxton, and 2 offensive linemen. So I guess the answer is none so far, but stay tuned, right? In the portal era, it can change by the minute.
Yeah, this is all, I mean, it's all, shifting beneath our feet, so to speak. And it's just, it's weird. Like cousin Dakota here says, I hate portal season. I get it. But, the point I'm trying to sputter out here is this is all, it's all unique. It's all new. And it seems like most of the commitments happen over the weekend. I think that coincides with visits. Also, a lot of teams are preparing for bowl games. So it's, it's just a mixed mash of, it's very, very difficult, but, I could be wrong, but I think it'll slow down a little bit during Christmas. Hopefully, and then speed back up at the end of it. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I have seen a couple of high school prospects kind of say that they are planning on committing on Christmas Day, which I thought was pretty interesting. Always it's like, can't we just take Christmas off, right? But I think to your point, Mike, I think as we get done with bowl season, I think as teams finish up the bowl games, we may see some players enter the portal. Like we saw today, there's been a couple guys in the SEC like Jalen Mbakwe at Alabama, which was the bowl game's coming up and he entered the portal today. But I would still imagine there's going to be a couple, and I think we'll get to the playoff and there will be some as well. But it always feels like there's a rush right after the portal opens, and then you kind of get these little mini surges after games. So I think, and I, as always, with a little bit of caution in the portal era, I feel like the bulk of the players have been in. We may see smaller amounts going forward, if that makes sense.
Right, but one big one, I don't know if it's official yet, but it's being widely reported. Steven, I asked you about him off air. John Mateer, the Washington State quarterback. And if you missed it, Shane and I on the last episode, go check it out. Of course, wait till this one's done. But we talked about early projections for next year, and we both pegged Oklahoma at 5-7. Again, way too early to be doing this, but we got to beat people like Steven and Athlon Sports to the punch and giving out 5-7. Now, that'll change dramatically if they get John Mateer. Now, What can you tell us? And again, we're just assuming he's there, but because they've hired his offense coordinator, they've hired his quarterbacks coach, now work at Oklahoma. So, maybe we shouldn't assume, but if it's Oklahoma, if it's someone else, what would a team potentially be getting in John Mateer?
I think it's fair to make that connection, Mike. I mean, if you hire his offensive coordinator and another assistant, I think it probably speaks to where this is headed. But of course, like we say in the portal era, probably should never assume anything. Some of the Washington State fans this year called him Johnny Football. Obviously, Johnny Football. I don't know if we could necessarily say that he's in the same planet as Johnny Manziel, but he is a really good player. Threw for 29 touchdowns this year. He ran for 15 more. The Johnny Football nickname kind of became because he is a very good runner. And so I think he did a lot of good things like off schedule. Ben Arbuckle did a nice job of developing him in his first season as the starter. If there was anything I would say that throws a little bit of caution to this is the schedule that Washington State played this year. When he played Texas Tech, he was like 9 of 19. When he played Washington, I think he was about a 50% completion rate. He had good numbers against Boise. That was probably one of the better defenses within the Mountain West that Washington State played because they kind of played a hybrid Pac-12 schedule with Oregon State. They played some Mountain West teams. It wasn't the toughest of schedules. So I guess the good news is that he already comes in with the familiarity of the offense. And I think if you're Oklahoma, you're looking to find improvement and fast and supercharge it. He can do that for you because of his fit. Certainly helps that Deion Burks is coming back too. But I do think it is fair to wonder like how anytime a quarterback is making that jump from that level to the SEC, how would he hold up against some of these defenses? But I think in terms of for Oklahoma, I think you've got to be all in on trying to get him for this season.
Yeah, and real quick for anybody that didn't know, I had no clue. So I pulled it up while Steven was talking here. Here was Washington State, their schedule this year. Portland State, Texas Tech, Washington, San Jose State, at Boise State, Fresno State, Hawaii, San Diego State, Utah, lots of states in here. New Mexico, not state, but just New Mexico, Oregon State, Wyoming, and then they're going to play Syracuse in the bowl game. And they had a really good record, and then they lost the last 3. So they finished 8-4. So very respectable. But also you got to consider, Steven, he's got 2 years to play. Doesn't mean he will for 2, because he could be so good he'll go to the NFL. But given Oklahoma's schedule, I mean, they got a couple weeks to get it in gear. But after October 11th, I mean, it is, buddy, you better have your offense up to speed when you got Texas, at South Carolina, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama, Mizzou, and LSU. I can't, obviously the recipe this year is not going to work to where you're scoring 17 points per game or whatever it was in conference play. I mean, you're going to have to get into the high 20s to even split in conference play, I would think.
And not to mention, Mike, I think it's fair to say all those teams from October 11th to the end of the season could easily be top 25 teams. I mean, I think certainly Texas, South Carolina, Tennessee, heck, throw Ole Miss, Alabama. I mean, basically everybody's going to be a playoff contender on that schedule. So it is really difficult. And if anything, the familiarity that he and Ben Arbuckle already have, and I think the adaptability that Arbuckle showed. I mean, keep in mind, Cam Ward was Washington State's quarterback in 2023. He transferred to Miami, and now John Mateer steps in. So the fact that they've had 2 really productive quarterbacks and 2 kind of different offensive schemes to some extent speaks well, I think, of Arbuckle. But it also, given that schedule, I think you need somebody who can hit the ground running and get your offense going. So that is another benefit, is just familiarity and ability to sort of supercharge your offensive improvement, because you're going to need it with that schedule. Mike, you said it best. I mean, you can't score 17 points and expect to navigate that schedule in the SEC next season.
Right. So, hey, we're spending all this time on a guy that's not even in the SEC, not yet at least. Who are the standout? Maybe we don't even have to do it team by team, but standout portal additions individually that you think will have the biggest impact based on the decisions that have been made so far, either to leave an SEC school or to join an SEC school, if that makes sense.
Mike, I think one of the biggest additions so far in the SEC has been Micah Hudson of Texas A&M. I mean, he feels an immediate need for Texas A&M. Former five-star receiver, didn't play a ton of Texas Tech. It feels like he was hurt a little bit, but it feels like he's a guy at the high-level impact that he could make on a Texas A&M offense that needed playmakers this season. They had a lot of solid receivers, but it really feels like they could use kind of a one kind of number one kind of target receiver. So I'm looking at him as being a potential impact player. Obviously, like I said, he didn't play a lot last year, so there may be some catching up that he needs to do. But I think in terms of filling a need in a player, it's got to be Micah Hudson over at Texas A&M. You also mentioned the Ole Miss kind of Arkansas connection. I love what Ole Miss is doing in the portal once again. Sorry, Arkansas. But Lucas, I think, could be an all SEC tight end. You're picking up two starters on the offensive line. And of course, I've always thought pretty highly of Jalen Braxton's talent. So look forward to seeing what he can do next season. Obviously, not great for Arkansas, but Ole Miss has really benefited so far.
Mm-hmm. No love or I shouldn't say that. But just what is your thoughts? I thought I was the Hugh Freeze hater for Jackson Arnold going to Auburn.
Yeah, I love this pickup for Auburn, Mike. I think, just in terms of upside, I think Jackson Arnold has it. Like, is he going to live up to the hype as like a 5-star number one type quarterback type of, performance coming out of high school? Maybe he doesn't quite get there, but I don't know how you evaluate what Jackson Arnold did this season because of the injuries Oklahoma had at receiver, the inconsistency in the offensive line, changing offensive coordinators during the year. Credit to him and Joe John Finley for fighting at the end of the season, to beat Alabama, sort of doing what you had to do. So I like this move by Auburn. I mean, they've got their playmakers at receiver with Cam Coleman and those guys coming back next year. Picking up Chaplin, the transfer from Virginia Tech, should be able to play right away at tackle. I like what Auburn's doing offensively, and I think Jackson Arnold in that system, I think he can sort of realize some of that potential next year.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know where things are currently. I mean, things seem to change by the day, change by the hour. But you mentioned Hudson going to A&M. It sounds like there are also, or it may have just been one or the other, but there's been a lot of reports that they're in on Nick Anderson, the former Oklahoma receiver. Let's say they get both of them, which again, I have no clue if that's going to happen or not. But how big of an impact would that be for that A&M offense, and particularly, it's tough to evaluate Marcel Reed by the end of the season. I've made no bones about it. I think A&M really disappointed in the final month, but didn't have a lot of help either. He wasn't surrounded by a lot of weapons. So if that's your quarterback moving forward, which certainly by all accounts he will be, you got to give him all the help you can. And I have to think Nick Anderson would be a enormous pickup potentially.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're talking about going from, wherever you thought A&M's receiving core was last year in the SEC, you're adding sort of two difference makers at the top. Like, they immediately become your best two receivers. You go back to that 2023 season where Nick Anderson, I think, averaged over 20 yards a catch over at Oklahoma. So now you have somebody who can stretch the field. You've got some guys with some potential. You've already upgraded the talent. And so I think that now you can properly kind of evaluate Marcel Reed and also Colin Klein's system when you're able to bring in that talent at receiver. Because like I said, it is an immediate upgrade, and they needed these kind of guys to be able to change the offensive trajectory and also be able to evaluate him. So if they land both, I mean, I think you're talking about probably one of the more improved receiving cores in the country next year.
Mm-hmm. And what about some of these guys that have gone to LSU? Any of those that you think fit really well with what the Tigers are trying to get done on the field?
Yeah, I think so. They picked up the corner from Virginia Tech, Delaney, today, and I really thought, 2 years ago, I thought he was going to be a rising star. Maybe between the injuries and the inconsistency of Virginia Tech's defense, I don't know that maybe necessarily he's gotten kind of the credit maybe he deserves, but he could be a really nice pickup in that secondary, considering the turnover, considering all of the inconsistency and the need for difference makers back there. I think he makes a ton of sense. And then I love the Barry and Brown pickup too. I mean, for LSU to lose CJ Daniels, to be able to go out and get somebody who can also play right away, at receiver and help Garrett Nussmeier. I think it's another big pickup. So I like what LSU has done in the portal, adding some guys on the defensive line, secondary, adding some receivers. It feels like they're off to a really good start and a kind of a critical time for that program, given what happened with Bryce Underwood and given the way the season ended. I think the next question is going to be, can they get anybody on the offensive line that helps, considering they're probably going to end up losing 4 starters off that group? That's the one position that I would like to see them address, albeit everybody's looking for offensive line help, and that's probably one of the positions in biggest short supply in the portal.
Mm-hmm. And I see a comment here. Cousin Clark, Nick Anderson, just big games against Arkansas State. He had 2 catches for 68 yards, so that doesn't check out. But Tulsa, he did have a monster game, 120 yards, 3 touchdowns. But, I mean, heck, he had a touchdown. He had 10 touchdowns, all-time record for Oklahoma as a freshman. Seems pretty proven. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He scored a touchdown in 7 games. So I would not agree with that. Maybe you would know better than I, Steve. Is he unproven? I feel like he's quite proven.
I think anytime you're averaging 21 yards a catch, you're probably doing something right. I mean, certainly only 1 full season of production. I think you'd want to see more. But I think, this also kind of gets at some of the portal thing too, is that you're also you're buying like upside, you're buying potential. How do they fit into your offense and your team? And so when those are the players that are in the portal, you're looking at somebody's production at Oklahoma and saying, hey, if we can take him in our offense and take his big playability and put him in there, maybe he stretches the field, he takes the pressure off everybody else. That's what you're buying. You're buying upside, and you're buying that, hey, if he only catches 40 passes, but they go for 8 touchdowns and 650 yards, you would take that, right? Because of the way the receivers played last season.
Yeah, I certainly would. How about this question, Stephen? Great question. I appreciate you, Dookie Booty. It's hard to take you seriously with that name, but I do love it. Have you seen all these coaches giving up large chunks of their pay this year for revenue sharing? Not just revenue sharing, but Brian Kelly has committed NIL donation match up to $1 million. So hopefully they get to $2 million there, and he'll give half of it. Of course, we've seen Mike Norvell give up some salary. Mike Gundy, I think he kind of had to, but that's just the way. Believe it or not, I mean, I ain't crying for these colleges because they burn money like no other. But I think people think that they're sitting on like a war chest, and what it is they spend it as quickly as they make it so that they can claim nonprofit. And that used to be facilities and just stadium, now obviously to the players. So yeah, I think that is a sign of where this sport is and where I think a lot of these schools, believe it or not, even at the high level, are going to be struggling to pay all this money. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a theme with Norvell and Gundy that they are going to be probably inching towards the hot seat next year. I mean, Gundy was kind of forced into it because it seemed like they kind of gave him the offer and said, yeah, you're probably going to have to sign this or we're going to do something. But I do think it is kind of a changing of the guard a little bit in college football. I mean, if you go back like 8 to 10 years or so, like everybody was like getting a new football facility. There was the saying from athletic directors who'd always go, if we don't have a crane up tomorrow building something, we're already falling behind. And now it's not facilities. It's about, what can you do to compensate your players and then also as well as some of your coaches. So we are seeing this shift in dynamics, which is more money to the players. And I think you'll see that become a trend even more coming up because everybody's trying to figure out, like, this is also going on with the transfer stuff too. Like, what are the roster limits going to be? How do you get to the scholarship total? And then also, how do you meet those kind of financial caps that are going to be in there too? So there's still a lot of change coming. And I think you'll see more coaches do that, even ones that aren't on the hot seat, like Norvell and Gundy.
Right. Hey, shout out Stephen Hill. Just became a member. Welcome, Stephen, to the family. We really like Stevens around here. But, all right. So anyone else standing out to you, even if it's standing out in the wrong way, losing a lot of guys via the transfer portal, like S. Hubson Hobson says Bama 24/7 is freaking out right now. 18 players in the portal, and the 5-star they just signed just jumped in. So, how close to that top of the list is Bama with players jumping in the portal?
They've been pretty quiet so far. I was kind of thought maybe we'd see them be a little bit more active. I think they've brought in a punter and a long snapper as their only portal additions so far. So that's probably not going to do anything to calm anybody's nerves in Tuscaloosa. I think stay tuned. I think if you're Alabama, obviously with DeBoer coming in his first season, there probably will be some attrition and some change from the one staff to another. I would get worried if in a couple weeks Alabama doesn't have some additions. Especially they're reportedly, I think, bringing in some of the receivers to visit Tuscaloosa, which is a position of need, especially after you lost Prentice and you lost Kendrick Law, Caleb Odom as well. So receiver going to be a big kind of watch for me to see if they can bring anybody in. Like I said, and just in general, I thought they'd be more active so far. So I guess, like I said, stay tuned for Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else standing out to you, either gaining or losing a lot of players?
One addition I really liked, and I thought it kind of went under the radar, is Kevin Coleman going over to Missouri. The fact that they're losing Luther Burden, Theo Wees, being able to pick up somebody who's been already a difference maker in the SEC is a big get. On the sort of downside, Mike, I think we have to kind of throw in Kentucky, Mississippi State, and I don't want to pick on Arkansas, but I think they have to be in this discussion so far. If you're Mississippi State, you're losing guys like Mario Craver, Kevin Coleman. Yes, you brought in some defensive reinforcements, but you don't want to lose guys who can help be part of the solution going forward. You kind of want to be additive, not subtractive on that front. And for Kentucky, I like what they've done on the offensive line so far. I mean, they brought in 2 potential starters. The transfer from Bowling Green did really well last season. He was the first team All-MAC. I think he only gave up 2 sacks. So, I mean, they're doing the right things on the offensive line. The question will be, what do they do at receiver? Are they able to get Malik Murphy in as a committed transfer at quarterback, since that's been rumored? And for Arkansas, I think the question is going to be, kind of like Mississippi State. They've been losing guys. Like, can they get sort of like replacement level and be additive because of what, Taylor Green coming back next season, sort of building on the success they had last year. So, so far, I would say probably not the direction Arkansas fans would have wanted, just because the additions aren't really adding up to taking the replacement successfully of some of the guys they've lost.
Right. And like Cousin Ken says, Florida, they got a backup punter. So where is Florida in all this mix? Because I thought that was the plan, right? Where we got, I know they got a bowl game. Maybe they're waiting for the bowl game, but we're not firing Napier. We're going to use all this money on players. And, maybe I'm missing some, but I'm not seeing a ton of big additions here for the Gators.
What's with the SEC and punters so far? Vanderbilt picked up a good punter from Washington State, Nick Haberer. We mentioned Alabama, and of course Florida picking up Tommy Doman from Michigan. Yeah, I think Alabama and even Georgia too. I mean, Texas has brought in 2 transfers so far. Those guys have been kind of quiet, so I think we'll see going forward if they make any additions. I guess maybe if you're a Florida fan, the biggest reason for optimism ought to be you've got maybe a top 5 quarterback in college football and DJ Lagway returning, and that kind of just makes up for it. But I think they are going to need some portal additions on both sides of the ball to sort of be a playoff team. Lagway can cover up for a lot, but I think you'd like to see a little bit more activity so far in the portal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just a little bit surprised by that. But again, I think if you're not signing anybody right away, I think that tells you that you're not overpaying. And I think, like I keep saying this, Arkansas losing all these guys, but who did they not lose? They didn't lose Taylor Green. So what does that tell you? It tells you that they paid Taylor Green, and maybe they're not meeting some of these other guys' demands. But what do you think with Mississippi State? I know you hit on them there, but I'm just trying to figure out what. Maybe they just don't have any money. I don't know, but they are. I'm trying to figure out what in the world they're playing, losing productive players, losing quarterbacks. It's almost like, I thought last year was the reset. Now it seems like we're resetting after a reset.
I guess maybe the most optimistic view of this could be they've been very heavy so far on defense, and they have added 2 receiver transfers who should be able to help right away. Especially the kid from Michigan State, Jerron Glover. I think he can come in and make an impact for them. The only downside that I would kind of say so far is we talked Mississippi State portal needs at the start. I kind of expected to see a little bit more high impact players on defense. And the guys they've got are so far are really solid. But at the same time, though, I think in order to sort of change the whole outlook of this defense, they are going to need some guys who can really make an impact right away. It's good to have depth. It's good to sort of, build up your whole talent level there. But to go from 16th in the SEC to 10th or so and try to make a run at a bowl game, I would like to see more high level impact guys from Mississippi State come in.
And because Paul says Texas brought in a 2-time all-conference punter, Steven. Give him some respect there.
Baumeister. Yeah, he's a good punter coming over from Utah. I think he's also from Australia. So you get those Australian punter things that have been going on recently in college football. So.
Yeah.
Oh, and hey, by the way, Cole Brevard, great pickup too for Texas. He's scored like a 300-something pound defensive tackle. The last couple of years, Texas has really done a nice job of fortifying the defensive line through the portal. So I like that pickup.
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you this, Steven. I don't know if you've given this a ton of thought, but if really there's no one even in charge, sadly. But let's say Greg Sankey, let's say Tony Petitti, they called. You can exit this chat as soon as they call, Steven, if you got to take it. But they call Steven Lassan and they say, how do we fix this? What is something, and maybe it doesn't need fixing. I think clearly it does. But whether it be, one portal window and maybe it after the spring or one portal window and maybe it's January 1, I don't know. Is there anything that you can think of or that you would do if given the power to kind of clean some of this up? Because I'm hating to see, I don't know the kid's name, but the Penn State backup quarterback, I saw him get in the portal. I mean, they might need him to win a national championship. Well, they don't got him anymore. Texas has just had a lineman jump in the portal. Tennessee's lost 6-7 guys. I know Georgia's lost a couple. I mean, it's nonsensical that these teams are playing for a championship and their depth is suffering because of the portal.
It's a great question. I think one of the biggest obstacles is the academic calendar, because players trying to get to a new campus, be able to be registered and start there in the spring. That is my biggest question in all this. It's like, it doesn't seem like anybody has a really good solution to any of it. It does feel like we could shorten the portal windows a little, sort of like shorten them. Like, I think it's going to be shorter in the spring. Do we really need it to go from December 9th to the 28th in the winter right now? Maybe make it like 5 days or something to shorten it and also it also kind of trims up. I think what happens is you see one player commit to another school, then you sort of set a chain reaction of people just kind of chasing open spots and all that. So maybe it'd be a little bit more strategic in terms of movement, but I would shorten the windows for sure. Maybe only make it one and leave an exemption in there for coordinator, coach loss, some kind of major change in the spring. Shorten it and keep it to one window, and that way you don't have any kind of crazy movement after the spring.
Yeah, and again, I'm fully never have I said I don't want players being able to transfer. I don't want them to not be able to get paid. But I think there is some logic also, Steven, to say you can only transfer once a year. I mean, yeah. I don't think that's like a crazy statement. And I would also say, I think you brought this up, maybe someone else. I don't know that we'll ever get this again because I think because of lawsuits and whatnot, but maybe like a one-time transfer, you could, and I would say if you're a graduate, you can transfer. So really it's a 2-time transfer. But beyond that, I think you should have to sit out if you're transferring twice before you're a graduate.
I like that idea. I will tell you from tracking the transfers, there's a lot of players that I've entered in the database for like 3 or 4 times now in 3 or 4 years. And you've also seen some data, and I hope this doesn't sound like I'm an old person yelling at the cloud or anything, but it's, there is like, progress to degree. Like, are you really making progress to your degree if you're transferring 3 or 4 times? And so I think that has been a concern from whether it's the academic side or coaches, and it's been more of a concern now. But it does feel like if you're looking to sort of tighten the process up a little bit, and I think the goal ought to be, keep in mind, I mean, no other sport has the roster craziness that college football has. I mean, the playoff and bowl games are going on. At the same time, the look ahead to 2025 is already started. This would be like the Chiefs going into the playoff game and wondering if like Travis Kelce's going to be negotiating with the Jets or something for next season. That's kind of the way it is. But I do think if you shorten it and you also sort of say one time for freebie, one time for graduate, and then if there's a coaching change, you could transfer. That's 3 exemptions in there. I think that's a pretty fair system. And also it just gives clarity to some of these rosters and helps kind of everyone, whether it's fans, coaches or players, kind of understand the landscape a little bit better rather than the free for all we have right now.
Right. Well, I do apologize for turning into 2 old men yell at the clouds. But, Steven, I got to remind the cousins this week, one of our partners is back. Manscaped. You need a good gift this weekend for someone that you care about, like your dad, your brother, cousins. Get you a cousin here. Head on over to manscaped.com. Promo code that SEC, same as my bookie, THATSEC. Get you 20% off the full order and free shipping this week over at manscaped.com. Right now, Steven, they're really touting the Chairman Pro. They sent Shane one. That's how he keeps his dome so shiny. They sent me one. That's how I keep the beard trimmed. The Chairman Pro experience, that shave that is as smooth as you deserve, Steven, over at Manscaped. And don't forget that promo code, that SEC, THATSEC, over at Manscaped for 20% off and free shipping. Can't beat it. Steven, you got someone in your life that could use a Manscaped?
Of course. I think my dad and my brother would be great candidates for this. I hope they're not listening to the show because I don't know about all the cousins out there, but I'm really fretting like my Christmas shopping. It's like trying to get it done. So our good friends over at Manscaped will probably be getting a visit from me on my shopping experience soon.
Yes, sir. All right, Steven, let's get into college football play. I mean, it's wild that it's right around the corner. I mean, if you haven't been paying attention, we got games on Friday and we got games on Saturday. And thankfully, the SEC action both games on Saturday. So let's just go in order that they are scheduled to be played here, Steven, with Clemson at mighty Texas here. Let's see, I got my footballs here. The footballs favor Texas, as they should. Texas favored by 11.5 down in Austin, over under 51.5. I know you've had a lot of time to kind of stew and chew on this one. What's your overall thoughts heading into a playoff game? And just really, I guess I should have led with this, Steven. How great is it that before Christmas we're getting these massive games that we usually have to wait like a month and a half for?
I was going to say, first of all, I love like any college football. So if you ever, I guess I probably should say, if you ever want more than you ever could possibly know about the South Alabama Western Michigan Bowl game we saw on Saturday, perhaps the Sam Houston Georgia Southern game, I'm probably your guy. But at the same time, like, I'm pretty excited for some big boy football. I mean, we've got, Florida playing this week, Tulane in the Gasparilla Bowl, but to have the playoff be this early and we don't have the 20-something day layoff to see these teams play is pretty exciting. So the first year of the 12-team playoff, we're kind of figuring this all out, but man, it's going to be so great to see Clemson play at Texas. And of course, Ohio State and Tennessee on Saturday night is just going to be, there's so much intrigue for me in that game, and I just can't wait to get to Saturday and Friday night to see how this all plays out.
So what do you think of this matchup, though? Do you think that, because I've only watched Clemson a couple times. I watched them get just smoked by Georgia, watched them get beat down at home by the Gamecocks. They should be in, not Clemson. And then I watched the SMU game, and, they looked pretty solid in that one, but they blew a huge lead and nearly lost the game. How do they match up against the Longhorns?
Really interesting to see kind of how Clemson fares in this game because they kind of backed their way into the playoff. I mean, they got lucky with Syracuse beating Miami, And then, of course, that got them to the ACC championship, and then the last second field goal to beat SMU. So they're pretty fortunate to be here. But frankly, that also gives them nothing to lose. Like, they're a huge underdog going on the road. Cade Klubnik, the quarterback for Clemson, kind of a homecoming for him going back to the state of Texas. That is where I think Clemson's hopes of winning really start. It starts with Cade Klubnik. He has made a significant jump in his second year as the starter. It also goes along with Garrett Riley, their offensive coordinator, the second year of his scheme. If you think about Clemson kind of over the years, whether it was Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson or whoever was at quarterback, they always had difference makers at receiver. And they kind of didn't have that for a couple years there. They didn't, the talent level wasn't there, but they've got a couple guys, Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, two freshmen who've kind of helped to jumpstart this passing game. So I think if you're Texas, your pass defense has been so good this year, and you're going right up against the strength of that Clemson team, which is Klubnik and those receivers. I am very curious to see how that battle shakes out, because to me, that will decide whether or not Clemson has any chance of winning this game.
Mm-hmm. And you know, again, this is all guesswork because we've never experienced this 12-team playoff, but I tend to believe that this home field advantage will be massive. Obviously for Texas, for Ohio State, for Penn State, and Notre Dame. What's your overall thoughts? And I know that's kind of like an obvious statement, but that it is late in the calendar. Do you think it'll be a massive home field advantage, or do you think perhaps that it may not be? What's your thoughts?
I think it will be. And I think we'll see how the weather plays out at some of these places. That could maybe neutralize, could create some weird stuff in some of these games. But I just think if you're, Texas, you're already the favorite. You're hosting Clemson in a playoff game. And, for most of these places, whether it's Texas, Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, these are hard places to win traditionally. So I think as if the favorites, and I like protecting the favorites in the playoff as long as you can, the better teams. I think getting that home field advantage for the first round is very significant.
Mm-hmm. And going back to Texas and Clemson specifically, Clemson defense, how well do they match up, do you think, against this Texas offense, which seems like a different week? There's a different rumor about Quinn Ewers and what's he going to do? Is he going to go? Is he going to stay? Like, I don't know why this is such a, well, I guess I know why, because I know who the backup is, but there's just so much focus on that situation. Is that a disturbance at all, or is that just kind of nonsense that people outside of the program are focusing on?
I guess maybe the best, if I was Quinn Ewers in Texas, I think I would say, like, we've been dealing with this basically since Arch Manning has been committed, right? It's been like Arch is going to start and Arch is going to take over the job, and then he plays some against Georgia. So I think if anything, it seems like Quinn Ewers has the really good ability kind of to be like compartmentalizing all this stuff with the playoff coming up and sort of put all that into the background. And I think if you kind of study this matchup for Texas, Clemson's defense, I don't think is as good as it has been. And I think you can kind of trace it to the defensive line. They've got a couple guys, Peter Woods, TJ Parker, those guys, especially Parker. He kind of came on in the ACC championship game, and he's only a sophomore. He's been getting better. But if you think about those Brent Venables defenses, like, those dudes at the defensive line could get after you. They could get after you with just four, and it sort of changed how they could play defense. I don't think they're as good this year at stopping the run either. I mean, Louisville ran the ball really well on them. Some of the other teams, like, when they've lost or struggled, they've been able to be run on. So I think if I'm Texas, I'm looking at this going, our offensive line's good. We've got Kelvin Banks probably coming back at left tackle. Weisner came on over the last half of the season. You've got a Clemson defense that struggled. They're still pretty good on that side of the ball, but it feels like they're not elite. They're just kind of taking a step back, and that the struggles at stopping the run at times, I think, gives Texas a real advantage, because if they end up devoting some more guys to stopping that should open up some things for Ewers downfield. And Isaiah Bond's status, obviously still a question, but I like the matchup here for Texas.
Mm-hmm. So which game, potentially, we shouldn't jump ahead until we see him play, but again, they're double-digit favorites over Clemson. Who poses a bigger threat potentially? And maybe it's not fair because Clemson is on the road. Arizona State will be neutral site, but Who matches up better, I guess is a better question against Texas. Is it Clemson or is it Arizona State?
I think Clemson is probably a little bit better of a team, but I would go with maybe Arizona State here, just because they're going to have a long time to sit back and study both Clemson and Texas.
Yeah.
And they've also got two pretty good players. I mean, and I should say they're more than just two pretty good players. Sam Levitt, their quarterback, and also Cam Scattleboo, their running back. And their defense got a lot better this year too. So I would take Arizona State just simply because time off, and they were red hot at the end of the year. Clemson kind of backed their way in. Arizona State was sort of surging at the right time.
Mm-hmm. All right. How about thoughts on this other matchup, Steven? Cannot wait for the night game. Tennessee at Ohio State. The footballs are split. That means we're going to get a great game here, folks. Tennessee is an underdog. Those 7 points, that's dropped slightly since opening. Over-under's 47.5. Is this going to be the best first-round game, do you think?
I think so. This is the first-round game that I have kind of the hardest time figuring out what's going to happen, because I think you can talk yourself into, a lot of different things in this game. I think the first question is, how does Ohio State rebound from what happened against Michigan? And you kind of hear the narrative a little bit about, rebound, national championship, the redemption. There's still a lot to play for. And there is. But there's been a lot of noise since they lost that Michigan game. So I think I'll be curious to see, how do they put that in the rearview mirror and look forward? Because Ohio State still has one of the best rosters in college football. They could win the national championship. But if they're thinking about Michigan and thinking about the last couple weeks, they will get beat by Tennessee. So I think how Ohio State is just from a focus, from a mental standpoint, is a really big question in this game. And if I'm Tennessee, I'm going into this game thinking, first of all, we're the underdog. Ohio State's got all the pressure in the world, and Tennessee should just be able to go in there and play loose. There's some matchups I think that Tennessee can take advantage of, but at the same time, all the pressure in the world is on an extremely talented Ohio State roster that did not meet preseason expectations with that loss to Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do like the mentality for what it's worth. I mean, it's just pregame talk and whatnot, but I do appreciate Heupel's. He hasn't complained one time about the seeding. Just go down. We'll just put the ball down. We'll play. I do like that kind of attitude. I think that's the attitude you've got to have as an underdog on the road, one of the more hostile environments. But at the same time, I'm really struggling with this one, like you are, Steven, because fair or not, I mean, I have heard Ohio State described as a paper tiger by some, but others would tell you they got the best roster in all of college football. And what little I have seen, I've started to go back and watch more. I think their quarterback is fine. I don't think he's a superstar. I don't think he's bad. I think some people make him out to be bad. I think he's solid. And they have great receivers. I think their receivers will be a real mismatch for Tennessee's secondary. And then the defense seems pretty solid, and I love the running backs. So, man, this is going to be a tough one. And can Tennessee win? I think they can, but I don't know. I don't feel great about it. Where are you at with that?
I think if I'm Tennessee, I think I want to score first. And I know this sounds weird, but I want to add to the anxiety level in Columbus. Like, I want to get ahead early, and I want to make Ohio State think, oh no, here we go again. We just lost to Michigan. The doubt starts to creep back. The crowd, probably not going to be too happy if Ohio State falls behind early. So I think how Tennessee sets the tone early is important. You also brought up the quarterback situation, and I think that's important too for Ohio State, because if you've watched them over the last couple of years, like CJ Stroud was really, really good at Ohio State. I don't think Will Howard's in that same category, but I think he's really solid. Like, he's not going to make a lot of mistakes. He's really efficient. I think there's a couple mismatches in this game. Like, if Ohio State's offensive line holds up, then I think their receivers are going to make a lot of plays in this game, whether it's Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Ibuka, Carnell Tate. Like, they've got 4 or 5 dudes at receiver that are real difference makers. So I think how Tennessee's defensive line can get after Will Howard is going to make kind of the almost probably decides this game. But not only that, Ohio State made, I think, a big mistake in the Michigan game by just trying to prove they could run the ball, try to be tough, try to push around Michigan. They don't have the offensive line to do that. With their left tackle and center being out, they almost have to scheme around that, which is a lot of quick throws, maybe using some different stuff to the boundary to get the ball in the hands of those guys. I think if Tennessee's defensive line wins, then I think Tennessee's going to win this game. But I think if Ohio State's able to get the ball in space to the playmakers, it's tough to see Tennessee kind of winning this game. And if you flip it around, line of scrimmage is so important on the other side too, because I think Tennessee's got to get Dylan Sampson going. Ohio State's been very good against the run this year, which is why, hey, if Nico hits a few passes early and Tennessee jumps ahead, I think you feel pretty good about where you are if you're Tennessee. But if they have to consistently win 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, I don't feel too good about Tennessee's chances to win.
Mm-hmm. And the center, I know he won like center of the year. What is it called? The Rimmelton or whatever. But so he's been out for a good while. What about, who's the other guy? Is he the left tackle? Is he the one that's out?
Yeah, so Seth McLaughlin, the former Alabama transfer, was the top center for Ohio State. Did a great job for them this year. So he was lost, like you said a little bit ago, but they lost Josh Simmons, their left tackle, when they played Oregon. So they've basically been trying to. Then they lost their backup after that. So they've been shuffling some guys around. They may be a little bit healthier, but I think the broader point is they lost 2 of their 3 best offensive linemen to season-ending injuries, and I think it's really hard to compensate for losing your left tackle and your center. But again, to go back to that Michigan game, I felt like they did a really poor job of like game plan and execution and all that. I wouldn't guess they make the same mistake here. The question is, can Tennessee actually exploit it? And I think they can, given their talent in the trenches.
Right. Yeah, that's the one position you don't want to be weak at, going up against Tennessee. But you hit on something there interesting. So you said you want to see Tennessee get off to a fast start. Similarly, they did it against Georgia, but Georgia's just a lot more mentally tough, physically tough, tested. They're a championship program. Let's say something similarly happens, Stephen, where Tennessee goes up and down the field the first couple of drives and is up 10-0 on Ohio State. If I were to just give you that knowledge and nothing else, how confident are you that Tennessee would win this game?
I would say I would go from, I think right now it's probably like a 50-50 game.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it probably goes to 65-35 Tennessee. Because to your point, that did kind of creep into my mind when we kind of studying up for this game, is Tennessee's fast start against Georgia kind of fell apart after that. But I do think that the conditions for this game are just a little bit different, in that Ohio State coming off the loss to Michigan, kind of where are they a little bit? And in this Ohio State defense, if Tennessee is moving the ball pretty consistently in the first half, I mean, that's a really good sign. I know Ohio State has not played the kind of gauntlet of offenses necessarily in the Big Ten. I mean, Purdue, Northwestern, Iowa. I know
that's put it kindly.
Right. They're legit. I mean, they're only giving up about 11 points a game. And also, I think some of the things they can do in the trenches, whether it's JTT, Jack Sawyer, who created some havoc against Indiana and Michigan. So they've got some guys. And I think going back to the Oregon loss, they sort of tweaked a bunch of things because the game against Oregon went so poorly. So it felt like they were a little bit different on defense after that. So if Tennessee's moving the ball consistently in the first half, I think that's a great sign, given the talent and given the way Ohio State has played on defense since that Oregon game.
Mm-hmm. And do you put any stock? I know it was Vanderbilt, not to be totally disrespectful, but they actually, we all know Vanderbilt's been better this year, but I think Nico's played his best football towards the tail end of the season. And in particular, that Vanderbilt game was maybe his best with the explosive passing plays really being a huge factor for Tennessee. Do you put any stock into Nico? It's so wild, Stephen. Like, we get to the Arkansas game or Oklahoma, we're like, oh, this guy can't play. I mean, he started 4 games. I've seen enough. You know what I mean? Like, we're not even getting a real evaluation of him until probably like the end of next season. But now that he's seemingly playing his best football. How does that change anything? How does that change the calculus for Tennessee?
I think it gives if I was Tennessee, I would be feeling better about my passing game going into this matchup, just because of the way they played. Now, granted, it is UTEP, it is Vanderbilt. It's not like you're doing it against Georgia and Texas, but it does feel like just from not a stat thing. It's just that just watching him, it just feels like maybe the switch went up a notch or two over those last couple weeks. So I go into this game thinking that Nico took a step forward over the last couple weeks of the season, and I want to see him do it again on the road. If he does it here, I think we can kind of say, okay, he's probably arrived. If he plays well against Ohio State's defense and Tennessee wins, then I think that's kind of the true test to tell us that, yes, the last couple of weeks were not a mirage. He actually took that step forward.
And I just thought of something to ask you, Steven. I don't know if this has got any bearing on this game by any means, but so I got Tennessee's schedule up here. What, if any, of these teams that Tennessee has faced do you believe has a better offense than Ohio State? Is there a team on there?
I think on offense, I would probably say it's tough. Like Georgia, I feel like from a production standpoint, I think Ohio State's got better receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama probably not in that same category this year. So yeah, I would probably say Ohio State's probably been the best. The offensive line injuries sort of make this a little tougher debate probably than it would be. Like if they were at full strength on the offensive line, I don't think it would be much of a debate at all.
Mm-hmm. Because again, just based on Tennessee's track record, I mean, the good shot they hold you to 20 or less. Of course, this is on the road. Georgia got to that 31 spot, and that was made it not a close ball game. But if Tennessee can keep us in the 20s, I like their chances, if that makes sense.
I do too. I think this is probably going to be of the other four first round games. This one probably has the most intrigue. It's probably likely to be the closest of all of them. And I think just in general, we're probably looking at probably a lower scoring game. I would think probably something like we saw against Florida, something like we saw against Tennessee's matchup against Alabama, like maybe like a 24-17, 24-20 kind of game. I think if it goes higher than that, and I think you're seeing Ohio State really press the ball downfield, they're moving it with the receivers, and Tennessee's not running it well, but maybe they're hitting a few big plays here and there. I don't think that kind of game necessarily favors Tennessee. I think you probably want to get Ohio State in a game where their offensive line's under stress, and you're not allowing big plays downfield. And it's a little bit lower scoring of a matchup. I think that could favor Tennessee.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw this, Steven. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but Chip Kelly, apparently he said, we figured out what we screwed up against Michigan. We'll get it. We got it correct. Yada, yada, yada. So, man, he's got a lot to prove, I would think, in this game too.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons that they brought him in was to sort of first of all, take some of the things off Ryan Day's plate as being a play caller, coordinator, but also to add an element to the run game, which has been hit or miss at times for Ohio State. But in this matchup, we saw it against Michigan was totally missing. And some of that has been the offensive line injury. So not only is it Ryan Day, it's Chip Kelly. This also kind of what happened against Michigan also makes me think that they're probably not going to do the same thing. They're probably going to come out with a little bit better of a game plan because that they're under a tremendous amount of pressure on Saturday.
Kind of reminds me of a guy that used to coach at A&M named Jimbo Fisher. Had to bring someone in to fix his foolishness, but maybe that's not a good count, but I'm going to pretend it is. All right, so that's all we got on the playoff previews. But Steven also had a great idea. I'm upset I didn't think of it first, but so we got the schedule released. We've been having a lot of fun. We've been predicting games out that we have no business predicting. But Steven had the great idea of top games that are not on the schedule that he would like to see in the 2025 SEC football season. What are those games, Steven?
Mike, there may be a theme on some of these games, but I'll start with one of them because I have never posted anything on Twitter and gotten the reaction about the Missouri-Tennessee potential for a playoff game. So I would love to see a little stand on business bowl in the regular season next year. It's kind of a shame that we didn't get it this year. We won't get it next year, but sign me up for some Tennessee, Missouri matchups there. Also, how about South Carolina? Because I feel like this is going to be a team that is very trendy in the preseason, and rightfully so, given what happened this year. They start off with Virginia Tech in the season opener. And of course, they play some tough matchups at Missouri and LSU. But I would love to see South Carolina play Florida, get DJ Lagway and Lenore Sellers on the same field. Also, how about South Carolina versus Georgia? Getting Lenore Sellers against Georgia's defense. So those are kind of three that stood out to me. Mike, am I crazy on those?
I love them, especially Florida, South Carolina, in Georgia, South Carolina. I mean, it just doesn't feel like the SEC football I grew up in without South Carolina playing Georgia and Florida. And again, they say they're not biased. Please don't ever cancel us, SEC. But I mean, some of the things they do makes me think they're biased. You know what I mean? Because again, I know they had a lot of moving pieces to wrangle or what have you, but how you don't have South Carolina playing their top, not necessarily their top two rivals, but the ones that are closest, and they don't get Tennessee either. I mean, it's kind of nonsensical, but is what it is. And maybe that helped. That probably helped South Carolina to an extent this past year, where they didn't have to mess with those teams. Florida got so hot, and obviously Georgia won the conference, so maybe that helped a little bit. And maybe it'll help next year too, as they rack up the wins. But yeah, I would love to see those. Missouri, Tennessee, that's a really good one. The one I thought, kind of surprised you didn't go with, and I'm glad you didn't, Steve, because you're not a brand biased man, and maybe I am, and I don't think I am, but maybe I am, because I was thinking you were going to say Alabama, Texas, because that's been a nice series here. We'll get it soon enough, but. Yeah, that one was kind of on my list as well.
I like that one. I think just getting, I guess we'll see. I would imagine Jalen Milrose headed to the NFL based upon some of the intel that's been out there. But getting Kalen DeBoer, a huge test against Texas, also Arch Manning against Alabama, that'd be fun. I think first of all, both top probably 15-ish. Texas might even be preseason number one next year if a few things bounce their way. So definitely on the radar. Also would love to see Tennessee, Texas, just for the battle of the real. You have everybody during the week arguing about the UT thing over and over. And of course, Arch Manning versus Tennessee. That can't get past that one. So sign me up for that one. Sign me up for getting Auburn and LSU back on the same field, like old SEC West rivals. Ole Miss, Alabama, little Kiffin, DeBoer battle there. And of course, with all the quarterback, whether it's Austin Simmons or Jalen Milroe, I think that'd be a fun one too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the 1 year Alabama, I slightly down. I mean, it's not like they're awful, but they missed the playoff. Is the 1 year Kiffin doesn't get them on the schedule. I mean, this could have been the year for old Whiff and Kiffin. You know what? But at least he got to beat Georgia, and maybe they'll hang a banner for that. But I'm still so disappointed in those Rebels. They blew it. Let's just get crazy here, Steven. Let's put Ole Miss in the college football playoff. Let's say they beat Florida. Of course, that would change a lot of things. But just bear with me here. We're putting them in, and let's say they're in over SMU. I realize the teams are not identical, but last year they smoked Penn State. I think they would beat them again. I know they'd smoke Boise. So we'd probably get a show. I mean, I think they bare minimum would go to the Final Four if they were swapped out for SMU.
I agree with you. I think if Ole Miss is in the playoff, I think they would have had the ability to go a long way. And it goes back to a couple things. I think, first of all, if you do sub them in that path is pretty favorable. I mean, like you said, they beat Penn State last year. They'd be favored against Boise. They already beat Georgia this year. We'll see what Georgia looks like with Gunnar Stockton. I don't think they're going to take a huge step back, but they are a different team. So they would have had a pretty favorable path to the Final Four, but also just the way that this team was constructed. And certainly the offensive firepower was there with Jackson Dart and those receivers, but also the way that Ole Miss took a big step forward this year on defense. They were clearly so much better on that side of the ball. The investment was there, the schedule was there, the personnel was there, and they just fell short. Like, if you go back and look at the season, they are literally like one play and definitely two plays away from making the playoff, like one fourth down stop against LSU and Kentucky. And we're talking about an Ole Miss team that would have been certainly in the mix to be one of the top probably 6-7 seeds in the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and that's another one I would like to see, Stephen. Now that we're spitballing here, Tennessee, Ole Miss. As we need more Kiffin versus Tennessee. I think Kiffin makes. I don't hate him, but I know the fans do. I love his antics and his whiffery, but it seems like every other fan base hates the guy. So he gets the crazies to come out, so to speak. And I know he did that one night in Neyland Stadium. I was there. I can testify to that. But we need more Kiffin versus Tennessee matchups too.
Oh, sign me up for that one. I think we need to schedule that one in Knoxville early in the season at night, SEC Network, or heck, even ABC. Make it national. I did love the Ole Miss schedule getting, considering what's happened in the portal, the fact that Ole Miss and Arkansas play on September 13th. We don't have to wait too long to get those two teams squaring off. And of course, they get Kentucky on September 6th, the revenge game. So a very interesting start to the season for Ole Miss next year. What do you think about a like LSU Texas or Texas A&M Oklahoma, like A&M Oklahoma getting the old Big 12 thing back together? LSU Texas seems like a pretty good series. Remember the Joe Burrow game a couple years ago down in Austin?
Yeah, I like that, and I also would like to see. I don't think you said this. Apologies if you just did, but Arkansas, Oklahoma, them being so close, and I get it. You want Arkansas to be playing Texas. They probably should play annually in this league, but that don't mean they can't play Oklahoma as well. I mean, I'd like to get that thing going just for proximity's sake. Instead of all these are really good games because I'm used to Arkansas versus the West, but I know I say it's a rivalry, but I would almost rather see Arkansas Oklahoma than Arkansas Missouri because that's not even a competitive series. You know what?
I would love to see the Arkansas Oklahoma series get reignited. That would be a fun one, especially potentially at the end of the year. Arkansas's got some interesting scheduling and rivalries that, of course, there's some other dominoes with LSU and all that. So I like that idea. Let's get Arkansas and Oklahoma back together in the SEC on the slate. Probably if you're Sam Pittman, you probably don't want to see Oklahoma. Well, maybe you do, depending on what happens with the quarterback situation. But
as of today, you want them. As of tomorrow, maybe not.
Right, maybe not. Depending on the day, the transfer portal or the team's strength of schedule can rise or fall. But man, it's I don't know if you felt this way, but after seeing what happened this year with the playoff, and I would love to see the SEC play 9 conference games because of how many great matchups that are still on the table that are not happening. But given what happened with the playoff this year, I don't know that we'll see the conference go to 9 games unless somebody slaps a huge paycheck on the table and makes everybody's concerns look really small given the financial gain, right?
Yeah, and until the SEC gets some kind of guarantee that 4 teams are going to make it, like the Big 12 has, apparently they have requested. I don't know if that's true or not, but you'd probably know better than I. But I think they've requested that at some point or time. If something like that ever comes across, which I think eventually will, then we'll get to the 9 game. But no, under the current format, 8's going to win out every time.
Especially considering an SEC schedule is significantly tough at 8 already. There are some disparities in the scheduling given who you miss and who you don't play, but I think an 8-game schedule is more than enough in the SEC. The only drawback is there are games that we're not seeing, like Arkansas, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Florida, other potential rivalry games,
Mm-hmm.
but not. I thought the comment made a great point on the extra losses, that it does impact like bowl positioning. We have fewer bowl teams, fewer revenue. So I would love it, but I also think from a business decision, I don't think they're going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is unfortunate that it's all money, but that's what it is. You know what?
Yeah. Everything right now is like, it kind of goes back to the portal, it goes back to coaching. I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing a quieter coaching carousel, is there's just not a lot of kind of coaches like ready for that big time jump and promotion. Like John Sumrall is one of them, but it does feel like the amount of coaches available to take some of these jobs, and why you've seen more openings in the G5 level, is there's just not a lot of guys willing to move, given all the uncertainty, the court cases that are coming up or have been settled, the portal openings, and what do you do with all the roster stuff. So kind of a weird time. But at the same time, we've got like this awesome 12-team playoff starting, and this awesome SEC 2025 schedule that you've already simulated for next year.
All right. Well, hey, do you have anything else, Steven, or is that all our talking points on this episode?
I wanted to throw out something to you guys about next season, and that is the transfer portal. Sorry, the Heisman race for next season, because I was doing some thinking after watching Travis Hunter win the Heisman Trophy on Saturday night, and just realizing how many candidates the SEC could have. You start, and especially the quarterback position, like DJ Lagway, Lenora Sellers, Arch Manning, Nico at Tennessee, could be Gunnar Stockton at Georgia. There's just a Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, there's a whole host of candidates that are potentially, I think, on the top of the list for the Heisman Trophy next year. So it was a little quiet for SEC Heisman Trophy candidates this year, with none going to New York. But I think that probably changes next year.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't count how many, but I did see someone put out, the votes. I didn't see a single SEC guy on it. And I don't know if that was 10 deep or 8 deep or what have you, but I didn't see any. So yeah, we gotta get that cleaned up. But certainly I think this is going to be a year of the quarterbacks. Two guys, again, we shouldn't get too hyped up, but it's never too early to get too hyped up, Steve. Where guys, maybe a Mateer, maybe a Jackson Arnold, throw those guys into the mix. We'll see how good they are. But are there any non-quarterbacks maybe that you'd put on that list? I'm trying to think.
Brian Williams?
Yeah, that's a good one. I was thinking also struggling to come up with let's see.
I've got another one.
Okay.
Cam Coleman.
I think he's awesome. Now here this is the name I was thinking. Again, this is way, he's not done anything to deserve this. But if he continues to progress, if he's healthy and he's like the lead running back, give me Nate Frazier, Georgia. I like him a lot. But to your point, Cam Coleman, I think he's worthy of consideration. But it just seems like these receivers, the only way they get recognition, unless their name's Devonta Smith, is if they return kicks and they highlight as a DB, and they do all these other things. And I don't see Cam Coleman doing that. How about Michael Riley says, how about Jaden Baugh? The only problem there, he could steal votes from DJ, but that's a solid suggestion right there.
That's a good one. It feels like the running back position is pretty wide open next year in the league. I mean, I would assume Dylan Sampson's off to the NFL. Jarquez Hunter's a senior. Here's kind of a deep cut. What about Ruben Owens at A&M if he gets healthy next year?
Or Le'Veon Moss if he's back from injury and healthy. But yeah, that's an interesting one as well, because Moss kind of came out of nowhere.
CJ Baxter too, Texas, if he's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
To your point on Cam Coleman, like I think it would take like a Devonta Smith type season, and it feels like he's going to produce a lot of big plays, but maybe not enough to be like a Heisman contender. And that's probably not. There's like two kind of schools of thought. Like it's almost like how evaluating somebody's like best and sort of like ranking among players, and also like what it's going to take to win the Heisman Trophy might be two different things, if that makes sense. Like people are going to see the stats, they're going to see the flash, but they probably need to see a little bit more to award him the Heisman Trophy. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
And would there be any defensive player that I know it's very unlikely. Of course, you could just say a defensive player won it, but really kind of a everything player. But any consideration to any kind of defensive players?
I think Dylan Stewart for sure. It is really hard. I think you probably need the ability to like score a couple times or just be so head and shoulders above everybody. And Stewart could certainly be there. I think Anthony Hill at Texas, the linebacker, is really, I don't know if he'd ever get enough support for it, but it feels like he could have kind of the monster 2025 kind of season where he goes from being a breakout star this year to being kind of the top, maybe defensive player in the country next year. So I would throw those two in there, but it's going to be really hard for a defensive player to win absent some sort of flash, like a touchdown or like 25 sacks or something like that.
Right. And I was going to say Jayla Walker, but I just looked it up. He's a junior, so he's likely off to the NFL, but I would throw him into the mix if he returns for some reason. You know what?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like pencil in a Georgia defender next year. But I'm sure that they'll produce somebody on the defensive side of the ball that ends up being probably All-America, maybe fringe Heisman consideration.
Yep. All right. Well, Steven, anything else before we hop off the line?
Man, stay tuned for the portal. It's been a crazy couple of days since the portal opening. Look forward to catching up with all the cousins real soon on all the happenings in the playoff games this week.
Absolutely. Well, hey, before you go, Steven, as always, can you tell the cousins how to follow you and how to find your work?
Absolutely. You can follow me over on Twitter at Athlon Steven, Steven L. CFB, over on Facebook and Instagram, and over at athlonsports.com.
All right, Steven, I appreciate it. As always, stopping by, dropping all this knowledge on us. We appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out. We'll catch you tomorrow on the next one.
Hey, buddy, this beer's for you, Mike, and Cousin Shane. That SEC podcast loves the Pirate, and the Pirate loves that SEC podcast. Hail State.